our eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now if you just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms, I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that people, places, and things have no power over us. People, places, and things have no power over us. Unless, of course, we allow them to have power over us. Unless we invite them to have power over us. This is a particularly hard one for me to get my head around because, I can go to a lot of victim places in my life. If I weren't a woman, if I weren't gay, if I weren't this, if I weren't that, then my life would be easier. Because I'm into that mode of thinking that people, places, and things have power over me. But this is a spiritual principle. It's a spiritual truth, sometimes called a spiritual law. And as such, it cannot be changed. We can't make it any different than what it is. We can't repeal it. We can't edit it. We can't do anything with it. It just is. It is now. It always was. It always will be. The same truth in our lives. See, my mother doesn't have any power over me. President Obama has no power over me. The candidates who are running for president have no power over me. Bill Gates has no power over me. Unless, of course, I give my power to any of those people. But the spiritual truth is that people have no power over me. Conditions have no power over me. How much money I have in my bank account has no power over me. The number on the scale in the morning has no power. Oh, of course, unless I give it power. And it has a lot of power over me. The truth is, the terrors that are going on in the world actually have no power over me until I give them power over me, because conditions have no power over me. We're a spiritually principle-based church here at the Center for Spiritual Awareness. Some churches are Bible-based, some churches are ritual-based, some churches and spiritual communities are meditation-based, other churches and communities are earth-based. The Center for Spiritual, and we're happy all of them are there. We are happy all of them are there because we find comfort and we can learn from them. But at our essence here at the Center for Spiritual Awareness, we're a spiritual principle-based church. So people say, what kind of church do you go to? You can tell them. We're a spiritually principle-based church. Well, today I want to look at one of the spiritual principles. It's from this book, and it's sort of designed to help us wrap our head around today's spiritual principle, which is people, places, and things have no power over us. This is a book called Living the Science of Mind. It's a compilation of essays by Ernest Holmes. Now, this book was written 57 years ago, and he had written some of those essays much sooner than that. But they wound up in a book 57 years ago. And at that time, they were considered ancient teachings in New Thought wrappings. They're still considered ancient teachings in New Thought wrappings. The truth is, I don't care how much it helped the people 57 years ago. I only care how much it's helping us today, which has the potential. These essays have the potential to help all of us a lot in our lives. So here's the one that I want to work with today. We believe that the kingdom of heaven is within man and that we experience this kingdom to the degree that we become conscious of it. We believe the kingdom of heaven is within human beings and that we experience this kingdom to the degree that we become conscious of it. We're standing on holy ground right now and you can't change that. We're standing on holy ground right now and you can't change that. Heaven is all around us right now, and you can't change that. To the degree that we become conscious of it is the degree that we experience it in our own lives, the degree we feel it in our own lives. And some of us, you know what? We walk around in a fog, don't we? Experience a fog. Many of us walked around in a chemically induced fog for years and years. Some of us are still walking around in an emotionally induced fog. And when we do that, it's very difficult to experience the kingdom of heaven that is at hand. Well, Ernest Holmes says, when you wake up and you wonder how you got here, how did I get in this mess again? What he says is that we pay too much attention to our personal history. And that's how we got where we are right now. We pay too much attention to our personal history. We got lost. We were running around with cataracts, spiritual cataracts in our eyes, and we clouded our vision. Sometimes that's what I think the purpose of CSA is. We are a church that removes spiritual cataracts so that you can make your life better. We don't need to make your life better. When we remove the cataracts, you make your life better because you can see the truth of who you are and who this world is in our life. And when we remove those cataracts, the doors of heaven open up and pour out a blessing for us we can't even believe. Pour out a blessing for us so great that we can't stop ourselves from testimonies. My marriage is great. My finances are great. My health is great. I am so creative right now that I am just a blessing to the whole world. That's what happens when we begin to remove these cataracts in our lives. Well, what is it that clouds our vision so much? It's that reliance on facts that we've been so engaged in. See, when we have reliance more on spiritual truth than on fact, our lives just start to go up. They just start to get better. When we begin to rely less on facts and more on spiritual truth. You know, most of us, many of us, are still relying on facts that we heard as little children. You know, and here's the truth. Little children can't see big picture stuff. You all know, or maybe you were a child, your parents got divorced, and you thought you were the cause of your divorce. Because you were a little kid, you couldn't see big picture stuff in your life. Well, you couldn't see that they were overworked, or that they had failure feelings themselves, and they were putting that on you. Maybe they yelled at you, and they called you lazy or stupid, or you weren't pretty, or whatever it is, that you weren't as good as somebody else. That wasn't about you. It was always about them. That they were overtired or overworked. And many of us have been parents who have done that because we've been overtired, we've been overworked. We didn't know the spiritual truth of who it is that we are. Well, here's your bonus spiritual truth this morning. And that is that you are whole, perfect, and complete, just as you are right this second. And anybody who told you anything less than that lied to you. Amen. The problem is, when we're kids, we tend to believe it because who's telling us? We love the people who are telling us this, and we know they love us. We just haven't seen where it's coming from their feeling of spiritual inadequacy in their life. Now, I always like to say this when I say, parents, be careful with this one. Because raising entitled, bratty children is not really what we're looking for. So when we say we want you to tell your children they're whole, perfect, and complete, it doesn't mean that there aren't corrections to be had. But we differentiate the correction with the behavior than with the person. So that the child knows they're whole, perfect, and complete, and their behavior is simply unacceptable in our life. To experience the total kingdom of heaven, we have to see facts as only directional signals to the gates of heaven. We see those facts. We don't stick our head in the sand. We see the facts in our life. Our finances need work. Our marriages need work. our health needs work. We see that stuff. But we see it as directional signals to the gates of heaven, because we know that heaven is within every single human being. It's not real estate. It's a mental state to be in heaven. Everywhere you go, there it goes with you. But we only experience it to the degree that we can. We had a man who's passed on in the church. He was on the board of trustees, very important. One of the reasons that we're so successful today was because of this man. And he had an oxygen tank. And everywhere he'd go, he'd take his oxygen tank. And sometimes he said, people will say to me, boy, how long have you had that problem? And they would point to the tank. And Joe would always say, that's the solution. That's not the problem. That's the solution. See, he chose to live in heaven in his life, and we can choose to do that as well in our life. It's your point of view. Many of you have heard me tell my favorite story of the golfer. There was a young golfer about 20 years old, and he wanted to go play golf, and he called his dad and his grandfather. They were all three were golfers. And he said, Saturday, let's go play golf. Meet me at the golf course. And so they said they would, and they did. 9 o'clock came, they met him at the golf course. And if you know about golf, you know if you're a threesome and there's a single waiting to get on, they'll put the single with the threesome. And so they knew that they would probably have somebody come on. And sure enough, they were on the first tee. They were practicing, getting ready, getting warmed up. And they saw a golf cart come down the trail to the first box. And out steps a gorgeous woman. And they were thrilled. They thought, oh, this is great. And so the woman says, look, I am so happy to play with you guys, but here's what I want you to know. I have my own golf coach. And so I don't want you to teach me how to play golf, because sometimes men can't help themselves. Just can't help themselves. So they said, just please don't teach us anything. Teach me anything. And they said, fine. And so they played, and they had a great round. And she was a very good golfer, so she kept up with them. And they reached the 18th hole, and she left herself a putt, which was about 10, 12 feet. And she said, you guys have been so fabulous to me, not trying to teach me how to play golf. I want to say that the person who gives me the best advice on how to sink this putt, I'm going to take you home to dinner tonight. Make a nice dinner. That's the Sunday version of the story. And so the young guy, the 20-year-old says, well, I think if you hit it just to the right, you're going to be fine. And the dad says, I think if you go just left of the cup, you're going to be fine. And the grandfather walks over, picks up the ball, and says, close enough. I never get tired of telling that story, so you better never get tired of hearing that story. But the point is, he knew what heaven was, and he made it happen. He made it happen. So we have to ask ourselves, do we know what our individual heaven looks like? Or are we waiting to die and hope we'll be pleasantly surprised? Because heaven is now and it's here. So we need to get right with it right here. Most of you, in order to be able to know what heaven looks like, we have to have what Ernest Holmes called a mental equivalent. Now, a mental equivalent is exactly what it sounds like. It's something that you have in your mind that is reflected by what you want out there. You can never have anything out there unless you have a mental equivalent of it in your mind. Now, sometimes what happens is we need to make sure our worldview and the people we're around is big enough so that we can have a new mental equivalent shown to us. So, for instance, I came from a working class family. I never knew people lived on a golf course. And when I started playing golf, and I would go around, I'd see all these houses circling the golf course. And I began to get a new mental equivalent. And I said to myself, I want to do that someday. Whatever it is you want out there, you have to have it in your mind first, and very often you have to surround yourself with people who have a little more than what you have, not only in material goods, but also in compassion, in love, in a feeling of service, or whatever it is you want, you need to surround yourself with people so that you can get a new mental equivalent in your life. The person, one of the greatest things about Jesus was that he showed us mental equivalents all of the time. You know, those of you who are familiar with his Sermon by the Sea sermons know that biblical scholars call them the kingdom of heaven parables. The kingdom of heaven parables. Because he was giving us an idea of what heaven would look like for ourselves. Why did he use a parable? Jesus used parables when he thought people weren't listening. He would say, when his disciples said, "Why are you telling us these stories?" And he would say, "Because those who see aren't really seeing, and those who hear aren't really hearing, and they're not really understanding what it is I'm saying." And parables, small stories, whether they're true or not true, help us to begin to get that in a deeper way. And that's certainly true of me. When I hear a story, it sticks with me more than somebody just saying, "Here is what it looks like." When we can begin to feel it with color, the color of stories that are often there. So I want to just look at a couple of parables that Jesus used to help us understand what heaven looked like in our lives, a new mental equivalent. And what he said is, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who threw seed on his soil. And he goes on to tell all the bad soils. But his point of the parable was that if we prepare our mind, our soil up here, if we take time to prepare it, we will get into heaven. That's what heaven looks like, is a person who's already prepared their mind for their good that's here anyway. How do we prepare our mind? We read something every day. Just read one little thing. Get a Science of Mind magazine and just read the thought of the day. Or whatever it is. Sometimes some of us are on email, little thoughts of the day through email. Whatever it is, make yourself, train yourself. Don't wander around being a victim. Train yourself to read something every day. Get into classes and begin to be with like-minded people who are learning new things as well in this life. That's how we begin to prepare our mind. The second one is the parable of the mustard seed. And those of you who remember, the mustard seed is the tiniest seed. The kingdom of heaven is like what we do with the mustard seed. And what he's talking about here is we have a little tiny skill. Oh, it doesn't even get to be called a skill yet. It's really a desire. We don't have any skills yet, but we're not going to get bogged down in thinking this desire cannot be made because we don't have skills. The skill is so tiny you can barely see it, but you plant it anyway. Perfectionism is the kingdom of hell. And if we can begin to reverse that and work with the tiny, many of the most successful people here on the planet never went to college. But what they did was they took a tiny desire and turned it into a tiny skill. And then they wandered around and they followed the successful people in their field. They did the visioning and the visualization. They put in the time to work with their tiny seed and make it happen. And the last one I want to talk about is the parable of the wheat and the tares. Jesus shows us very clearly how to get to the gates of heaven here in the wheats and the tares. And what he says ultimately is this: plant your little seed. And if the tares, which in our mind is the fear, the prejudice, the limited thinking, the judgment, the self-negation, if those tares go into your little seed, leave them alone. Don't touch them. Don't look at them. Don't water them. Don't do anything. Just leave them be. Because when the harvest of your seed comes in, those tares will take care of themselves. You just harvest your good. That's so important because Here's what happens when we get fearful. We call our posse, don't we? Oh, and this is happening, and that is happening, and something else is happening. What we're doing is we're tending to the tares. We're not tending to the seed. Look, it's the same amount of time to call your best friend and start not talking nice about your situation. It lost me for a minute, but I knew it'd come back. It takes the same amount of time to call your best friend as it does a practitioner. Same amount of time. And we can help. Practitioners can help you tend your seed and ignore your tares in your life. See, sometimes I wonder why it is that some people come to church only occasionally. I ask myself, is it because we don't have help? Is it because we don't preach that you're making Jesus sad if you don't come to church every Sunday? Is it because you think Buddha will frown at you if you don't come to church every Sunday? What is it that makes us? Because the truth of the matter is, we have some important information here to make our lives so much better in our lives. When you stay awake to who you truly are, which is, and believe me, if you're anything like me, I need to be reminded at least once a week that I'm whole, perfect, and complete. And now we have Wednesday night, so twice. But it's not just Christian parables that will teach us this. We have Jewish parables, Muslim parables, Hindu parables, earth-based parables, Taoist parables. All kinds of parables will teach us the same information, that heaven is right here at hand. And to the degree we can become conscious of it, that's the degree we can experience it. And no more and no less in this life. It's not only parables, it's music that can help open the kingdom to you. It's nature that can help open the kingdom consciousness to you in your life. And you know, when we begin to open ourselves up to the kingdom, and by that I'm not talking about material goods, I'm talking about a state of mind.